Good evening. It's not stopping. It could even be accelerating. We're told intelligence says there are up to 100 protests planned tonight across the country and up to 30 counter-protests. And whilst we all hope and pray we don't get the scenes of violence that we've seen over the course of the last week, none of us at all can be confident that that is the case. I wonder, because I fear that we may be in a perilous position. Why do I say that? Well, the bedrock of how we settle disputes, of how we govern ourselves, is we vote. We go and we argue against each other, and we have a government that is elected, and we might not like that government, but we accept that the majority have voted for somebody other than ourselves, and we say, you know what, we're going to work hard over the course of the next 5 years so that our team win next time round. That is parliamentary democracy. That is what works. That is what maintains the peace. You don't need to go out and riot and protest and set fire to things, all the while you've got confidence in your parliamentary system. My fear, and I'm certainly seeing this from people that write to me and email me, is we're beginning to see, particularly in a younger generation, a growing number of people who just don't think democracy functions, just don't think it works for them, just don't think that promises that get made at elections are actually carried out. And that concerns me. One of the other things that has led to such ill feeling in the country is two-tier policing. Now, we had a fierce debate last night here about whether two-tier policing exists or not. Well, I'll tell you something. There is a very widespread perception that it does. Let's just see this from Craig Guilford, Chief Constable of the West Midlands Police, speaking earlier on today.
Salam alaikum. There is one tier of policing that implies to all of us, and that means that we police without fear or favour. Shukran.
I don't think coming out with foreign languages addressing one particular community in the West Midlands makes an awful lot of sense, does anything to dampen down speculation about two-tier policing. And extraordinarily, Emlyn Richards, the superintendent of the West Midlands, was asked, how was it that a large number of masked men, some carrying dangerous weapons, were allowed to go outside that pub in Birmingham? One man came out, was beaten to a pulp, was finished up with a lacerated liver, windows were smashed, the pub doors were locked for safety. How is it that wasn't being policed? And extraordinarily, what Superintendent Richards said, we had the opportunity to meet with community leaders prior to the event to understand the style of policing that we needed. So you ask a group of counter-protesters, what policing do we need? And they say, absolutely none whatsoever. And the police say, that's fine. The point I'm making is nothing is being done by the police or by the government to get rid of this perception of two-tier policing. And none of that is helpful in any way at all. I'm joined to discuss the implications for democracy, for law and order, for our society, by Ranil Jayawardena, former Environment Secretary and International Trade Minister, Member of Parliament from 2015 to 2024, and Joe Phillips, Paddy Ashdown's former Press Secretary and former editor of Radio 5 Live's Sunday Service programme. But first I'm going to go to immigration lawyer and friend of this programme, Ivan Sampson, who joins me down the line. Ivan, you and I have debated the legal and illegal immigration situation in Britain regularly over the course of the last 3 years. What do you think has led to this massive upsurge in violence, and does it surprise you?
No, I think there's been some terrible rhetoric by the previous government blaming migrants for much of our woes, the lack of housing, the pressure on the public services. And it's simply not true. Look, we have a legal duty to protect those that have come to this country, whether they're migrants, whether they're asylum seekers. We have legal obligations under international treaties. And especially those that are coming in for protection. We don't want to persecute those people that are seeking protection from being persecuted abroad. It's a terrible look for our country.
If we were to take out for a moment the numbers that have come into Britain and claimed asylum, but talk about the levels of legal migration, the population increase of 6 million since the Conservatives came to power, surely then the arguments about shortage of housing, lack of access to GPs, problems with infrastructure, surely then there is some logic that says that mass immigration has made life harder for many millions of people.
Look, the data doesn't bear that out. If you look at actual legal migration, they actually give a positive impact on our economy. That's the data. Whereas I agree that if the census, if the feeling in the nation is that we shouldn't have so much mass immigration because they don't share our values, then the government should instill policies to reflect that. But what we can't do is ignore people's feelings. I'm with you on that, Nigel. There's a lot of people who have strong feelings against the way that our society is being molded by people who don't speak our language, don't share our values.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. That's a debate that needs to be had.
But this only works, Ivan, if people get what they vote for. And some would argue
Yes.
that repeated promises have been made to lower the overall numbers coming to Britain, and the opposite's happened.
Absolutely. And the Conservatives are the worst. I mean, it's increased the most under their watch. So absolutely, it's very difficult to get migration down when there's a commercial need for it. We don't have the people to fill the jobs. So we need to recruit our local people. We need to have proper training so that in the long term, we can put British people for British jobs and not foreigners.
Ivan Sampson, as ever, thank you for joining us and giving us your opinion.
Pleasure.
Well, Ranald, it's all your fault. You've put out terrible a narrative that people's lives are being devalued by mass immigration, whilst at the same time your government opened the doors in a way never seen before.
Well, I like Ivan, but that was, I'm afraid, rather incoherent. He's absolutely fair to say that immigration has been too high and that more needed to be done. That was why the scheme like Rwanda was important to send a deterrent. But here's the problem right now. You've got a Labour government who are going to allow a full open door and allow people to come here, whatever.
I don't think Ranald, I'm really sorry. I don't think that a party that promises in 4 consecutive general election manifestos net migration figures of tens of thousands a year and produces 750,000 a year can really have a go at the Labour Party.
Well, the Labour Party are the party in government right now, and people are unhappy with some of the things that the current government are doing. They've scrapped the Bibi Stockholm, haven't they? They are going to scrap the RAF camps that were going to be used. They're going to use government housing.
And we're going to come to that later in the programme. Am I right to worry that a growing number of young people are losing faith in the democratic system and that turns them towards violence?
You're right to worry about it. Clearly, as you said, elections are the place that people should fight for what they believe in, not violence on the streets on whatever side of the argument people are in. And we saw in the general election, we're seeing now people use violence or indeed threatening behaviour to try and intimidate others. That is what is wrong.
For one of the first times, Joe, ever, the Liberal Democrat share of vote, a number of MPs actually reflected what people voted for.
Absolutely.
Not the case for other parties, but I'm not going to delve deeply into that.
No, I think it's the one thing you and I agree on, is proportional representation.
But do you see my point? That I genuinely believe, just when I see the email box that comes to me...
But, Nigel, I would say to you, if you believe in parliamentary democracy, which is about the only thing that keeps us vaguely on the straight and narrow, why didn't you ask the question that you asked on Twitter in Parliament? Because, wait a minute, let me just finish, because I think what we have to remember, perhaps has been forgotten in the news coverage today, the inquest's open today into the deaths of those 3 little girls that were murdered in Southport 2 weeks ago. Their lives, their families absolutely upended, a town in shock. If the person who had done that had been white, or the little girls had been Asian or of a different, would you have gone on Twitter and asked the same question? Basically raising a question, raising suspicions and fueling what was already going around, that this person with a fake name was an illegal asylum.
We have to say alleged murder at this stage, just for legal reasons.
Yes.
When Parliament debated it, it was an expression of sorrow. It wasn't the time for a political comment. When the London Bridge murder happened, We learnt within an hour that the person had been on a police list. Whenever there was an atrocity in Northern Ireland, the first question anybody asked is, was this person under investigation? Over a week ago, there was all sorts of nonsense going around on the internet, which, had it been slapped down, I think the Southport riots would not have been as bad as they were.
Did you slap it down?
I asked one very simple question that would have slapped it down. Was this person on a list or not? And do you know what? I still haven't got an answer.
But you didn't say this is untrue. We don't know
I didn't go along with any of the conspiracy theory that he'd come on a boat last October, etc. I ignored all of that. It would have been enormously helpful if the Home Office and the police had told people very quickly that whoever this man was, he was actually born in Cardiff.
Nigel.
They did none of those things. And I think the silence made what happened in Southport worse. But now where we are is much more serious.
Now where we are is much more serious, but you should have used the parliamentary democracy.
I had no means to do it at that time.
Of course you did.
No, I would have been, if I'd got
You're an elected MP.
If I'd got up and asked a political question like that at a moment of expression of sorrow, it would have looked appalling.
Well, it didn't look particularly good on Twitter. And
well,
look what
I'm sorry,
happened.
I disagree entirely. I think it was a very fair question, a legitimate question, and it's still not been answered. But when Parliament comes back, I will answer it.
But isn't the point that actually nothing that someone might say on Twitter, or indeed in the House of Commons, should condone the violence that's happening?
No, absolutely.
And that's the point here. That people should not say that they've got any excuse for the behaviour that we're seeing on any side.
Ranald, I've fought elections for 30 years. I've never been involved in any violence or street protests of any kind at all. I utterly condemn what is going on. I know there are problems out there in the country, but my real worry here is a growing number of people are losing faith in democracy.
And I'm afraid that it is not helped by, as Ivan Solomon just said, your, I presume, still party, Ranald, but, your former colleagues like Suella Braverman, who stoked up the woke wars, the culture wars, and used language like invasion and talked about
What would the Lib Dems do about the cross-channel problem?
The Lib Dems would have done something to clear the backlog. I mean,
just let everyone stay.
No, part of the problem is the backlog, and you know that, and you know that. Because they're sitting...
Well...
People are waiting, some of them for up to 2 or 3 years, in hotels, waiting for their asylum to be processed.
No, the problem is that people are coming to the country illegally.
Well, I tell you what we'll do.